Yo, guys, welcome back. We got another video today. Today we are talking about DK tanks, and we have three specs for you today that are solely meant for DK tanking in 25 mans. Two of which are going to be really, really, really good specs that I will actually highly recommend, and then a third that's just kind of more for fun. So we are recording for YouTube. This will be a bit of a ramble as I go along. This is also a video that I wouldn't recommend for people who maybe are either new to DK tanking or maybe aren't totally familiar with everything that is involved with DK tanking. Although I might have some guides that I can recommend for you in the description below for maybe for you to get involved with DK tanking to get your feet wet. But this is a little more in-depth guide on the specs and what we're going to be talking about today. First off, with DK tanking and their specs and their talent builds is there's a lot of wiggle room, like a lot. There are so many points that you can pick and choose, like preference based on if you want more damage or if you want like a weird talent here and there. And I'll talk about those as we go along. But just keep in mind with any of these builds, if you want to move around a couple points here and there, totally, totally fine. Absolutely fine. And the same is true with glyphs too. That's why I love DK tanking so much, is because you can run a number of different glyphs, a number of different talent points, and have a lot of success with DK tanking. Now, first build that we got to talk about is Blood DK. To me, this is like your standard 25-man Blood DK build. This has everything that you want in it. Obviously, we need 5 out of 5 Blade Barrier. I go for 5 out of 5 Bladed Armor because I really like the flat attack power you get from it. To me, it's almost mandatory to have 1 out of 3 Incentive Blood. It's a really good runic power generation. Got to get the rune tap. Um, biggest talent point in Blood is probably Veteran of the Third Ward, which is going to be increasing our strength, our stamina, and expertise by a flat amount. I personally go for Mark of Blood. Totally optional talent point here. You don't have to go for it at all. I just think it's a fun cooldown to have as well. We get 2 out of 2 A-Bomb's Might for our raid buff. We got our Hysteria here. Obviously, we get Vamp Blood. Improved Death Strike, pretty much mandatory if you're going to go this far. And then, of course, Will the Necropolis. This is going to be our bit of our cheat death, kind of our last resort situation. It says that damage that you would take that would take you below 35% health or taken while you were at 35% is reduced by 15%. Pretty solid here. Now we go Frost subspec here. We're getting toughness, of course, improved Icy Talons, or just Icy Talons. I like going 2 out of 2 Icy Reach, totally optional here. I prefer it because it's really helpful for just that extra range. I think about fights like Yogg. Yogg 1 or Yogg 0, just phase 1 of Yogg is really annoying with how the ads just spawn so far away from you. I really just enjoy the quality of life of Icy Reach. However, you can totally spend those points elsewhere, like in Black Ice would be a great choice. You can get Lichborn if you really want Lichborn. You can spec into this, which is really nice because you can become undead for 10 seconds, and then you can then death coil onto yourself for self healing, which is really fun. We get a 3 out of 5 in Killing Machine. Anytime we get Killing Machine procs and spend an Icy Touch on it, you're going to see the largest threat gap in all of WoW's existence. Endless Winter is really good here, just a flat 4% strength and no runic cost of Mind Freeze. Strength, again, is going to be increasing our avoidance, so we like strength. And 3 to 3 Frigid Dreadplate is just going to reduce chance melee attacks will hit you by 3%. Plus, we get 5 out of 5 in Anticipation. Now, lots of room to wiggle here. You could potentially go 3 out of 3 in Virulence, or however you say this, and then spec out of Dark Command. Personally, I just think the sacrifice of just going straight Glyph of Dark Command is fine. And the benefit of getting spec'd into this is it also helps your Icy Touch to not miss, but I would just rather have the avoidance from Anticipation and spend the points elsewhere and just take Glyph of Dark Command. Totally up to you. I really like taking Glyph of Disease as a DK tank just in general. You'll find that your threat is actually perfectly fine. And it's best to spend 1 global to just refresh your diseases so that you can focus on self-healing with your Death Strike, rather than refreshing your dots by doing Icy Touch and Plague Strike. A typical rotation, if you're just going to do Icy Touch, Plague Strike to refresh your rotation or refresh your dots, is actually going to be a really healthy threat rotation, and there's nothing wrong with it at all. Absolutely not. I just prefer disease. I think that 1 global save, focus more on self-healing, is going to be a little more of a better play style in my opinion. And obviously, you got to go Glyph of Vamp Blood. It's just going to be a solid defensive glyph that you can run here. Another glyph that I love to run is actually, say, Glyph of Death and Decay, and you could run this on pretty much any DK spec at all. Glyph of D&D, even if you're not spec'd into 3 to 3 morbidity, is just going to do amazing AoE threat. Absolutely amazing. It's so busted. This glyph is so dumb on DKs. You run this glyph, you're going to have way better AoE threat, and it's really nice. Great quality of life. Just not too important in 25 mans. It honestly isn't. So this would be a classic Blood DK 25 man run spec. One thing that we're skipping out on here is improved icy talons. The reason I don't get it in this spec and for this video, even though I would highly recommend it, and basically what we would do is just spec out of um, anticipation, one more, and then get improved icy talons. Something like this would work great. Glacier Rot is also going to increase the damage of our icy touch, but the reason we don't do it for 25 man is because we're just assuming that we got that point being taken care of elsewhere, either from our Frosty K or from literally anywhere else. So lots of choices here. We don't have to take it. However, I would highly recommend it for a 10 man. You just don't need it. This is pretty much your standard. This is your meta, probably best DK tanking spec I could come up with. I would recommend this if you're new to DK and you just want copy paste this build, you will be fine in 25 minutes with this build. Now the next one, we have an Unholy build. Love this build. Again, lots of room for you to mix around some points here and there. But here's what's fun about this build is we do get the spell hit here. We get Morbidity, which is just going to reduce that cooldown of our Death and Decay, which is going to be really nice quality life for all AoE fights in general. What's fun is we do get a pet with this build. And this is optional too. You do not have to go in for all the way down to get this pet. But what's nice is it actually reduces the cooldown of our Army of the Dead, which is in a way a defensive. And we get to have the pet, which is really helpful for Death Pact. The reason why it's helpful for Death Pact is say you are running the first spec that we talked about and you don't have this. If you wanted to Death Pact and heal yourself for a fat amount, you have to first spend a global on raising your dead. Either you have done this before incoming damage and you have anticipated that it is coming, or you see that you're low on HP, you raise dead, and then you're spamming for your life to hit Death Pact. What if you don't have enough runic power for it in that moment because you just spent it on maybe a rune strike or something, or you're just spamming it? You're spending 2 globals to self heal yourself. What's really nice about this is you can just instantly self heal yourself for a ton with Death Pact if you just have your pet permanently active. It's kind of a weird thing being a tank with a pet, I know, but trust me, it's not a meme. This is pretty legit. I do like Reaping here because anytime we're going to Blood Strike or Pestilence, we get those converted into Death Runes. Death Runes are really good because it's just another reason for us to spend a global on an Icy Touch if we need it. This spec, kind of the whole point of it is that it's really high resistance to magic. We get magic suppression 3 to 3, so we take 6% less from all forms of magic. And on top of that, our AMS is going to absorb an additional 25% of spell damage. We get AMZ as an additional magic resistance defensive. And we get to have Bone Shield. Bone Shield is so cool. So cool. Um, Basically, we're going to be taking a flat amount less from all sources while we have Bone Shield up, which is really nice. We only get 4 out of 5 toughness here. We're just kind of short on points because I wanted to go all the way down into blood subspecs so that we get Hysteria. And a lot of this is basically the same as the last build that we did. You could, in theory, maybe move 1 point there into Sin of Blood so you get more runic power. Always a good option. And you're just sacrificing 1% crit. Not a big deal. You still get the Veteran of the Third War, which is going to increase your stamina by 3%, your strength by 6, and expertise by 6. You still got A-Bomb's Might. It's going to be a really good raid spec. You're not taking improved Icy Talons just like the last build was. Some of the big sacrifices, though, you do by taking this is Bone Shield just in general is weird. It's a buff where with the glyph we have 4 charges of Bone Shield up. And it doesn't equate to a lot of uptime if you're the main tank on a boss. What What's going to hurt you the most is the earlier that you go this spec, the worse it's going to be because you don't have enough avoidance to keep great uptime on your bone shield. You might be tanking a boss that, say, like Algalon, for example, he is going to absolutely shred through your bone shield in a matter of seconds, and it's basically like it wasn't even there. What's nice is if you're off tanking or taunt swapping, you can start the fight with a bone shield, take over a boss, and then refresh it while you're also tanking that boss. And it actually equates to a pretty decent amount of damage reduction. This this spec is not a meme though. What's really fun is I think about a fight like a Nubarak in TOGC. This is genuinely probably the best tank for solo or for main tanking a noob in TOGC, and I mean that very seriously. I do think this is probably the best spec you could go. Reason is because blood is going to have so much effective HP through to vamp blood and so much self healing. Um, that I think if you focus more on your magic resistance and your magic suppression with AMS and you have AMZ, and you on top of that you have your bone shield, and at that point in tier 9 you have a really good amount of avoidance. I think this build is going to give you a really good chance at surviving a lot of those freezing slashes from a noob. You're going to have a lot less magic damage coming in from leeching swarm, and just overall, you're going to be way tankier than a blood DK. And the reason why we don't want vampiric blood on a fight like a noob is because the more health that you have, the more healing that a noob is going to be getting from you from leeching swarm. So this spec is really, really good, and you'll find that it's actually very effective. It's really fun for AoE tanking, and it's just really fun in general. I think the play with having a tank, with having a pet, and having bone shield uptime, messing around, is actually a really really fun way to play DK tank. It's a really good spec. Trust me, it's not a meme at all. I will always 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 recommend that you go blood over this spec. Always, blood is just the premier best way to play DK tank. One thing that you're missing also is Killing Machine, Frigid Dreadplate. You don't really need it. This spec is just different. It's a different style of playing DK tank. It's a different type of incoming damage, and it has a lot less self healing and focus more on just damage mitigation, mostly magic damage mitigation. Again, we do run Dark Command. You could totally swap this out with something else, maybe like a Glyph of Death and Decay. Uh, that would probably be decent. I wouldn't recommend Glyph of Rune Strike if you're thinking about it. I wouldn't really recommend Rune Tap too much. You could go Glyph of the Ghoul, but other than that, I would run something similar to this. AMS and Bone Shield have to be kind of mandatory when you're going Unholy tank. Then the last spec that we're going to talk about is a Frost DK tank, and this is about as memey as it gets. I mean, Frost DK is probably the third best DK tank spec of all three because all three can tank for sure, but this one has got to be the worst of them all. This one is more based on damage mitigation done by armor, not effective HP and not magic damage, but this is armor that we are doing, and it just doesn't scale too well, and it just doesn't do that much damage or that much tankiness overall. It kind of misses the mark for what we're looking for. It does do okay though, and if you wanted to do a Frost DK tanking spec, this would be a decent one. You do get improved Icy Talons in case your raid needs it. You are still getting Rune Tap, although you don't even have to go into Blood this far at all. Blade Barrier is kind of mandatory, and at least some points in Anticipation is kind of mandatory. Here we're skipping on an Icy Reach, like I talked about earlier. I really like Icy Reach. You can totally spec into that if you want. Same with Lichborn. This build we're getting 4 out of 5 Killing Machine, which is pretty decent. I do choose to go Death Chill here. Let me explain the reasoning for Death Chill, because you don't go this in a normal Frost DK DPS build. I really like Death Chill in theory as a tank build, because if I'm playing Frost DK and I'm tanking, and I'm approaching like an AoE pack, like either I'm in a dungeon or I'm clearing trash in a raid, or even if I'm pulling a boss, I don't have to worry about not having a Killing Machine proc open. I can open either with a instant crit Howling Blast on everyone that I can hit with it, or I can just make sure that I'm opening with a Death Chill permanent crit Icy Touch. It's actually really, really helpful. It's really solid for tanking. I would just never recommend it for DPS. We do get improved Frost Presence, which is kind of nice. It's gonna um, we damage done to us is decreased by an additional 2%. Uh, thing about unbreakable armor, so it increases our armor by 25% and our strength by 20%. Again, keep in mind, strength is actually more avoidance for us. So armor by 25% plus the glyph is increasing it by an extra 30%. So it's actually 55% increase armor every minute. That's a really good, pretty decent defensive. Um, arguably better than Bone Shield, but that's pretty much all that Frost has going for it. That's it. Everything else here is just DPS. I mean, we gotta go down all the way and to get Howling Blast. I think Howling Blast is just too good, especially for AoE. And if you're gonna play Frost, like you're just gonna feel naked without it. So if you wanted to go this build, this is the setup I would recommend. There are some wiggle room with the glyphs, just like with every DK spec. I'd maybe consider dropping Dark Command here and going for something like Glyph of Howling Blast. That way, you're getting your Frost Fever applied to everyone that you hit with your Howling Blast. Another thing you could do is you could actually spec into Hunger and Cold, although I think it's kind of worthless. It's a lot of runic power, and all it does is just freeze enemies around you. The amount of times that you'd ever use this in PvE are really slim. But if you ever felt like it, you could go for it, and you would even take this Glyph of Hunger and Cold to reduce the runic power so that it's free. You can kind of use this as like an oh shit, we just pulled like 50 mobs and Nax, and when I need them all to chill. Or maybe you're solo kiting or solo tanking ads on Obsidian Sanctum, and you just want them all to like be frozen for a minute. You can take care of that yourself. I wouldn't really recommend it in any other situation. It's kind of trash, but if you want to, go for it. Have fun. These are my 3 tanking specs. Again, in order, this has got to be the number 1, the Blood spec. Number 2 is our Unholy spec, and then number 3, our Frost spec. I could talk about these specs forever. I don't even know how long this video is going to be. I feel like I've already talked way too much. If you have any questions about these specs at all, feel free to join me on Twitch, talk in my Twitch chat at all about it. If you want, you can comment below on this YouTube video. I'll try to answer any at all questions that I possibly can. I love talking about Death Knights, especially DK tanks. Um, and yeah, enjoy the discussion. This is like one of the most best times to start talking about Death Knights is because we have all the time in the world before Classic Wrath, and there's so much to talk about with DK tanks because there's so much you can do with them. The possibilities are endless on paper, but when you get in game, all it really is icy touch spamming. So enjoy the theory crafting because that's where all the fun is with DK tanking. That's it for this video. I'm gonna sign off there before I start talking way too much. Peace out, guys.